I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Bigfoot Breakdown. On the other shows we do, we periodically mention the term Woodwose, and I thought it would be an interesting one to bring up on this show. It's not a very long piece. I don't recall where the article was. I don't have it title on here, but this is the kind of thing, you know, if you really wanted to find out the source, you could look online. There's plenty of information on it. But let me go through this. It starts out, the Woodwose, also known as the Woodwose, or the wild man of the woods. And that's very interesting. This is, you know, from Western Europe. And when they called something the wild man of the woods, in the Pacific Northwest, that's what the native folks often refer to the creatures as, the wild man of the woods. So it's almost I wouldn't say a universal term, but it's pretty close to it.
Yeah.
So it goes, is a popular mythological feature that appears in literature, artwork, and architecture of medieval Europe. In fact, the legend of the wild man so permeated the Middle Ages that Carl Linnaeus, the famous Swedish taxonomist who laid the foundation for our modern biological naming system, created a classification known as Homo ferus, which assumed the existence of the Woodwose. According to Linnaeus's writings, the Homo ferus was a bestial creature that had human-like features but was covered in hair and moved on all fours. That's an interesting reference all by itself, that it moved on all fours. You know, most people, especially, and this comes back from, you know, DeHinden and Green and their work, and the foundation of this, you know, getting out to the public, was being bipedal was one of the main characteristics. But we found since then that they apparently are as comfortable on all fours as they are walking bipedally. Now, they will walk bipedally most of the time, but they seem to be pretty comfortable on all fours as well.
Yeah.
So Linnaeus also claimed that Homo ferus lived separate from Homo sapiens, had made their dwellings in the forests and mountains. In modern times, however, Linnaeus' Homo ferus classification has fallen out of favor with mainstream science and is no longer officially recognized by the scientific community. Which, that's interesting by itself, I suppose, because they didn't have any factual evidence, or nobody chose to pursue that line of query. The wild man is typically described as being comparable to classical mythological creatures such as the satyr or the faun. Other similar creatures can be found in ancient Roman mythology, such as Sylvanus, the deity of the woodlands. That's also very interesting. I mean, you know, those stories come from somewhere. There's grains of truth in all those things, whether they're, you know, made up or not.
Yeah, something has to start it.
Exactly. The Woodwose first began to appear on the landscape of European folklore in the 12th century, but it has endured as an enigmatic legend since that time. The wild man became extremely popular during the 16th century and was commonly depicted in engravings, paintings, tapestries, and other works by some of the most prominent artists of the Renaissance period, including Martin Schongauer and Albrecht Dürer. Legends of figures similar to the wild man have appeared in the folklore and myths of various cultures throughout history. The earliest recorded example of such a figure is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, an ancient Mesopotamian epic poem which a wild man named Enkidu is created by the gods to prevent King Uruk from oppressing his subjects. Some researchers have speculated that Grendel, the famous monster from the Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf, may not have been an imaginary creature after all, but rather a Woodwose, like entity due to the being described as a bipedal man-beast that inhabited the forest of Sweden. It's interesting too to note that there's a commonality. They talk about them being man-like, hairy creatures living in the forest or the mountains. It seems to be a common thread among all of these, whether they're perceived to be a fictional story or what have you.
Well, it's like how the whole legend of the werewolf started. You and I've talked about that in the past, about how it probably originated from a Type 2 or Type 3 Sasquatch. And
it could be that, and same with, there's stories here in North America too from the natives that are very similar kinds of things. They get twisted into all sorts of things by Hollywood, but and there's one I'm trying to think of. I can't. It escapes me at the moment. But yeah, things like the idea of something like a werewolf. And people had to grapple at the time. If you don't have that information in your frame of reference, you have to use the best you can. So they see something that's man-shaped, but is clearly animalistic, and you speculate. You jump to werewolf. Well, your
brain's going to go directly to what it knows.
Exactly. They did the best they could. So, yeah. And it goes on to say that perhaps one of the most well-known and influential renderings of the wild man archetype comes from the Book of Daniel, in which King Nebuchadnezzar II is exiled from society and begins to take on characteristics of a wild beast, including growing long hair and claw-like nails. According to Daniel 4:33, God humbled King Nebuchadnezzar II in order to punish his arrogance, to the point where the king ate grass as the oxen, and his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers. His nails like birds' claws. Some researchers have surmised that the account of King Nebuchadnezzar describes a supernatural phenomenon known as lycanthropy, an affliction in which humans have the ability to shapeshift into wild animals such as wolves. And I think that's where people get hung up on, things like dogmen or werewolves, which is the same thing, yeah. By the way, because of this. And it wasn't just wolves, as they state here. Lycanthropy was supposed the ability to shapeshift into all kinds of animals, not just wolves.
Yeah.
So I just think it's very interesting, when you look, and I'll have to look up some of these other references, like the Roman information and all that, to see, maybe it's worth doing another book on that stuff down the road. I don't know. I mean, I have lots on my plate, so. So what do you think about that? I mean, it's interesting information.
Yeah, very interesting. It brings up a lot of, history as far as things that people believed and why. So, I mean, it kind of follows along the lines of today with some researchers and what they think Sasquatch are, where they came from, what they can do. Very interesting.
It is. It's and the fact from the time period. People think this is a recent phenomenon, cultural phenomenon, the whole Bigfoot thing. But it's not. It goes back as far as written history goes. Sometimes you have to look for it, but it's there. So, folks, we'll place this in your capable hands. Let us know what you think in the comments.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.